This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Hello and welcome to episode 51 of the 1001 Movies podcast, based on the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. This week, we'll be talking about The Rapture, the 1991 film directed by Michael Tolkin.
Hi. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? How are you?
We're fine. You?
I'm fine, now that I dream about the pearl.
What dream would that be?
The pearl. I dream about the pearl. Tell us about it.
What's it look like?
You know, the pearl. It's a big pearl by a river. No, it's not.
You haven't seen it.
Yes, I have.
You can't fake it.
Well, it's a message from God. If you really want it, all you have to do is pray.
Pray.
He's coming back.
Slow down. If everybody's getting this dream, how come it isn't on the news?
Those who need to know.
And those that don't believe won't get the dream.
Before we get to the film, I'd like to take just a moment to thank you for listening. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, please give it a good rating in iTunes, and better yet, some positive feedback. More reviews means more exposure, and it will make all this hard work watching films and researching them so much more meaningful. Okay, back to business. This is normally the point in the episode in which I talk about the director, including some of his past accomplishments and everything leading up to the making of the film. Michael Tolkin is remarkable in that, although his resume is quite long, he's only directed 2 films, The Rapture being his first. Prior to that, Tolkin's main contribution to cinema was the screenplay for Gleaming the Cube, a lukewarm and forgettable movie from 1989 starring Christian Slater as a skateboarder fighting against weapons merchants in the black market. After learning that over 5 million Americans identified themselves as Christian fundamentalists, Tolkin soon developed 3 separate screenplays, all of them different versions of The Rapture. How he convinced New Line Cinema to produce the film remains a mystery, although Tolkin has said that they thought he was making a movie about bikers and orgies. How much of this is true remains to be seen. It's probable that New Line was partially in the dark about the film's subject matter. Despite the wide breadth of the subject matter of the films they made, a movie about religion could hardly be called marketable. You can't really talk about The Rapture without discussing the entire plot, so prepare to be spoiled. Mimi Rogers stars as Sharon, a bored 411 operator whose sole enjoyment in life seems to be weekends with her friend Vic, played by Patrick Bachau, while the 2 of them pick up couples in airport bars for orgiastic encounters. Among these is Randy, played by David Duchovny, with whom Sharon begins a long-term sexual relationship. After overhearing co-workers talk about the pearl of great price and talking with a pair of door-to-door Christian evangelists, Sharon becomes more and more interested in religion, and soon tells everyone she meets that she's been saved. Vic laughs at her and Randy scorns her, but jump ahead 6 years and we see that Sharon and Randy have married and have a daughter named Mary, and Randy has joined Sharon's religion. The family makes weekly trips to listen to a young prophet talk about the end of days, and things take a turn for the worse when Randy is killed by a co-worker who goes postal. Sharon is told by her prophet that the end is near, and she and her daughter Mary should spend their final days in the desert, praying and waiting for the moment when God will come to earth. They do so, starving themselves for weeks, but God never comes. Mary soon convinces Sharon that to meet God and be with her dead father, Sharon must kill her. And in the film's most jarring scene, Sharon shoots her young daughter dead, but lacks the courage to take her own life. As she sits in a jail cell contemplating that no decent God would ever permit her to kill her own daughter, the rapture comes. In the film's closing moments, as Mary's soul pleads with her mother to proclaim her love for God, Sharon steadfastly refuses and remains on the earthly plane of hell. To sum up the plot in one word, this film is pretty heavy, and I don't think my synopsis even really scratches the surface of the themes in this story. Prior to filming, Tolkin bore down hard on Mimi Rogers, helping her prepare for her role by making her be standoffish to strangers and never using the words please or thank you. The effect was to have Sharon just a bit aloof from the other characters throughout the film, and it worked well. The Rapture received mixed reviews upon its release, and it's fair to say that it more or less dissolved into obscurity years later. Michael Tolkin wrote and directed one more film 3 years later, The New Age, about a couple who questions monogamy. He continues working, although primarily in television. And here's the meat and potatoes. What did I think of The Rapture? Of all 51 films I've talked about on this podcast, this one is perhaps the hardest to talk about, despite the fact that it begs the viewer to discuss it afterwards. This is a good movie, and it should probably be given more credit than it now has 25 years later. Why, after devoting 6 years of her life to God, would Sharon be condemned to hell, or at least be barred from leaving Earth to go to heaven? As one character explains early on in the film, religion isn't just about going through the motions, but to have faith and believe in God despite all the evidence that points to God not existing at all. It would have been easy for Tolkien to blatantly condemn organized religion, but he doesn't go that route. This is not to say that this film is pro-religion, and few films are. Rather, part of the film is about why we believe in God and why we do good things to get into heaven. Is it because we want to be good people, or is it because we're selfish and we just want to spend eternity in bliss? Sharon obviously believes in God, and she's certainly going through all the motions, but at the film's conclusion we learn that people far less religious than she are allowed into heaven simply for being grateful for God's gift of life. This means that all of her devotion was for naught, and by putting her faith in the words of a prophet, rather than doing what her intuition tells her is right, she pays the price. Mimi Rogers initially comes off as standoffish and a bit bland, and this is no doubt an after effect of Tolkien's 2-month regimen with her during pre-production. Whether she's engaging in promiscuous sexual activity in the film's first act, or subjecting her daughter to what could only be considered child abuse by the end, she's completely unsympathetic. Even her marriage to Randy and their bearing a child is skipped over. The result is that as a viewer, we find ourselves objectively observing her doing things without pitying her or even judging her. This is an admirable breakthrough for a filmmaker and scriptwriter. It allows the viewer to come to his or her own conclusions about what the ending of the film means. Tolkien's script is not overtly anti-religion, but there is a subtext that organized religion may not be healthy. Again, we aren't hit over the head with this, but learn it from the context and the evolution of the plot. Tolkien originally planned to have Vic, Sharon's orgiastic former friend, appear in the final moments, beckoning her into heaven, but this was scrapped for technical reasons. The implication here is that if Vic, the epitome of promiscuity, can get into heaven, just about anyone can. You just don't need religion, a prophet, or starving yourself in the desert to get there. As mentioned in the book on which this podcast is based, The Rapture is one of the few films that handles the topics of God and religion frankly. It seems that so many films about religion have an overt agenda. The most obvious culprit that comes to mind is the abysmal God's Not Dead and its sequel. There's no doubt that The Rapture could make some people angry, and many people might find it boring. I found it mildly depressing, and it's one of those films that stuck with me for days afterwards. Just because it depressed me, however, doesn't mean I didn't like the film, and I have the urge to share it with someone so we can talk about it. That makes it kind of sound like religion, though, doesn't it? That's all I have to say about The Rapture. Tune in next week when we discuss 2012's Django Unchained, directed by Quentin Tarantino. In the meantime, feel free to email me questions or comments at 1001moviespodcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Twitter at 1001movieспc and look for the podcast's Facebook page. Until next time, happy viewing.